Welcome to the
Hi,
Jess and John pod. I'm Jess.
I'm John.
And thank you for the love so far. Our first episode went very well. Then we had a cold and stuffy noses, and we didn't want you to hear us like that. So we waited, but we're back for more.
We sure are. Dayquil does wonders. I hope everybody's avoided any deep fryer accidents over your thanks Friendsgiving holiday, whatever that is. And here we are. We're back. Thank you,
Yes.
guys.
Hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. John, how are you doing? What have you been working on?
I'm doing pretty well. We're going down to see we're recording this before Thanksgiving, so I might, on the third pod come back with a horrible deep fried turkey accident. I hope not to. Word to the wise, it's probably too late now, but don't throw a frozen bird in a deep fryer. I'm going to work on staying safe there. Still working with More Perfect Union. I think stay tuned for that. We're probably going to go visit Springfield, Ohio, and check up on that whole cats and dogs thing. So that's on my immediate radar. What about you, Jess? What are you working on?
Went out to Omaha and talked to Dan Osborne yesterday. That interview
Very
is going to
nice.
be coming out with Drop Site. And then put out a big piece on state treasurers investing in Israel bonds to the tune of $1.7 billion. They've got a lot of money, $580 million since October 7th, 2023. It's a funny situation because the chief comptroller, the county clerk in Palm Beach County, actually tweeted in response to the story saying, "Oh, Israel's a great partner. We always make so much money with them." And Dropsite News replied and was like, "Oh, well, why haven't you invested in Mexico, which has twice the yield? Why are you investing in your friend and ally?" And he ended up deleting the tweet. So that feels good to be holding public officials accountable with good journalism.
That is very good. There is inertia to this stuff, and I'm excited for the work that you do at Dropsite. I think that's a really good partnership.
Yeah, they're good people.
Good
So
people.
we wanted in this episode to talk about the 2024 election. We told you what we thought about it right after it happened. I think we still think a lot of the same things, but we wanted to explore, did everyone else feel the same way as us? Apparently not. But Kamala Harris resurfaced for the first time since the election. And John has not seen this video yet, so we're going to get John's live reaction.
Yeah, this is actually news to me, so I'm excited. I'm excited for how this goes.
I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take the power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose that you did. And you have the same ability to engage and inspire. So don't ever let anybody or any circumstance take your power from you. I just have to remind.
Okay. All right. So this is my reaction. Was that a clip? That was a clip?
That is a clip that was put out by the DNC. Why they chose it, we don't know.
Oh man. Yeah. What's my reaction to this? Well, I think unfortunately, that clip was really like on message for the Kamala campaign. But the unfortunate part to me about it is that it just really feels hollow. I mean, like, what power are we really talking about here? What power was this campaign really built upon? What like foundation was it built upon? In our first pod reaction, we were talking about the absence of, villains and heroes, or like, clearly defined stakes of this election. It just kind of felt like, hey, Donald Trump obviously is the worst person ever, and we are like filled with joy and happiness and celebrities. And that wasn't really connected to, I think anything that a person who's just out there watching these two people who want to, represent our country, it's not connected to anything that I think would, bring somebody who's skeptical about this in, where they can see like, yes, the people causing our problems are here. The reason why I feel something in an economy is because of these larger structural things. And this candidate has a track record of fighting against these things, and I can invest my trust in them. And there's a clear contrast between Donald Trump. To me, that clip just sounds like more of what the campaign was, with these really vague notions of like, you have power, exercise your vote, it's your civic duty, but like, why? What are we trying to do here? Why is it important to do this? You can obviously say it's important to keep Donald Trump out of office, but what is the big moral vision that I am driving towards that's not related to Donald Trump at all? And if that's the clip that the DNC is pointing out, I think it's kind of an indicator of the problem, is that we never really heard that argument advanced. And I think back to other times when we really did, like Barack Obama, that was a radically different candidate who was inheriting a bad economy, who had a critique about who messed up the economy, who had a vision for where to go. And I think those that I'm missing from a clip like that. I don't know, Jess, what do you think about it?
I actually would have loved to have a Chardonnay drunk stepmom in the White House from California. I think that's beautiful. And I'm sad we're not getting that. And this clip just reminded me of that tragic loss that our country just suffered.
We really do deserve a Chardonnay drunk in the White House,
Yeah. Yeah, she seems
Instead,
a
we're gonna
little
get
schwasty.
Yeah, we might get like, I don't know, heartburn and Tums and like McDonald's regret in the White House. Maybe like a Shamrock Shake hangover. I don't know. We get the government we deserve, right?
Yeah, that is the government we deserve. But I think something that rocked the political world, the people who talk about politics and it's their job to know about politics, Pod Save America, they do good work. They had Kamala staffers on who were like running the campaign, and they have zero self-reflection as to what went wrong. Let's watch some of that.
It's always worth reminding people, it's really hard for Democrats to win battleground states. Let's look at Pennsylvania. 25% of the electorate is liberal, roughly. 34% is conservative. By the way, in most battleground states, that conservative number is over 40. So in every battleground state, there's more conservative than liberals. So in Pennsylvania, if experts are to believe, Trump won conservatives 91.8, Harris won liberals 93.6. Moderates, Harris won 56.43, but you kind of got to win 60% of them, right? For Democrats to win battleground states, it is a false choice. You want to maximize your base, of course. And that was a place where we spent enormous time, a lot of resources. That's critical. And obviously, I think in Milwaukee, just to use that as an example, we hit our turnout targets, fell a little bit short in Philly and Detroit. So that's not good. That's part of the equation. You've got to couple that with dominating in the middle, not just winning it a little. We have to dominate the moderate vote. And I think as we look ahead to 26 and 28, particularly where you have seen drift amongst non-college voters generally, particularly those of color specifically, we obviously have to get some of that back. We can't afford any more erosion there. The math just doesn't fucking work.
John, do you think the problem with the Harris campaign is they didn't cater to moderates enough?
Oh, man, I saw that coming from a mile out. I was like, here we are, radical leftists running around with Liz Cheney and, doing our best to participate in all the culture war division, just amplifying that. I saw that and I was like, here we are again. We're running too left, everybody. We're running too left. We're going to lose this thing. And who to thunk it, right? I don't know. What's your reaction to this clip, Jess?
I watched this clip and it reminds me of something that Chuck Schumer said some years ago. He said, I don't think it's relevant that it's not recent because it seems that they still have this approach, the Democrats. And for those who don't know, Chuck Schumer has been the majority leader for the Democrats in the Senate for quite some time. Of course, they haven't been in the majority, so whatever. He said, for every blue-collar Democrat we lose in Western Pennsylvania, we will pick up 2 moderate Republicans in the suburbs in Philadelphia. And you can repeat that in Ohio and Illinois and Wisconsin. My question is to Schumer, if he still believes this, and any Democrat who still believes this, Where's the math? Show me the numbers. There is no proof behind this. They think they can just say things. And so I didn't listen to the pod save. John will be able to shed some more light on this. I did get a briefing on it from my boyfriend, who listens to these podcasts for me to save me the suffering, which is very chivalrous. But Kamala's staff was apparently saying, oh, we moved X points on immigration. She was 20 points behind on immigration. We moved up 7. Same thing for the economy. And it's because we ran these ads that were so smart and targeted. The thing is, why is immigration a top issue? Because people are afraid that they're not paying their bills, they don't have enough to survive, and they've been sold this narrative that that's brown people's crossing the southern borders problem. They've caused that for you. And because you're fearful for your survival, literally, you're like, okay, that's who I have to be mad at. You're mad about the economy because you know you're struggling, but you're working 40 plus hours a week, maybe 2 jobs, and still can't make rent. And so if you're not speaking to that reality, sure, you can run on, oh, we're being strong on the southern border, but that's not the response to demagoguery that tells the American public that that's who you should be fearful of. So I think they say, oh, we're so smart, we did everything we could. I'm not buying that. You have to address the root issues.
Yeah, and also, like, in that clip, he starts off saying, like, oh, it's really hard for Democrats to win the swing states. Like, but isn't that your job? Isn't it a politician's job who's running for president to win the swing states? Like, if it's hard to begin with, what are the root causes of it being hard? Like, we should be running, this gets back into the whole blaming third-party voters thing. Like, a lot of the analysis I've seen starts by blaming the voters, but it's really simple. A politician really has one job, and it's to win voters. And it's to lay out a big picture vision that people can judge if they want to vote to go that way. And then they can hire people who are experts, who know what they're doing to kind of execute this vision. But the politician's job is to be good at winning voters in swing states. That's the first thing. So we kind of start there and say, it's really hard, and so it's not our fault. Well, that's your whole job, actually. And the other thing is, what's so frustrating about politics is that we're governed all the time by this sense of, like, a moderate voter. Who is a moderate voter? Are they exactly in the center of every issue? Are they cutting the baby in half on every issue? And why don't Republicans seem to have the same problems with moderate voters, even though Republicans are anything but moderate? They're very radical. I think of the example of Ronald Reagan, right? Ronald Reagan is cited as a person, pulling off huge landslides, getting his agenda done. We're still living in Reagan's world. But did he always command votes like this? Was he always popular? Turns out no. Like, forever, Ronald Reagan was a kook. He was on the edge of everything that was popular. He was closely associated with Barry Goldwater, one of the people who went down, I think, in the presidential election of 1964, maybe. Barry Goldwater, this guy who is, Ronald Reagan's mentor, basically, just got wiped out in a landslide. And you would think then that, if Ronald Reagan wanted to avoid that, maybe he'll moderate his positions, go for those voters in the center. Is that what he did? No, he didn't. Ronald Reagan changed the polls instead of changing himself. But yet somehow, and now we're living in his world, and Republicans all take that lead. They don't moderate. They change the polls. They lead with their vision. They don't play on their opponent's turf. There was a lot of talk of that in the Pod Save episode. But the larger point is, Republicans are just putting the craziest thing out there, and they're bringing the rest of the country around to it. Because although many of the things that they're putting forward are based on lies or manipulation, making issues prominent that, aren't really a concern in the daily lives of people, that's how they're doing it. But we always look at these election losses as, there must be something wrong with us or something. I just think that a lot of this takes a predictable path. And here we are again wondering what the center of the electorate is, instead of putting forward a story that's going to bring a broad swath of voters behind the vision that we want to pursue.
You make a good point with the third-party voters thing. I've heard a lot of people still having this debate for some reason that they spoil the election, which assumes the Democratic Party is entitled to the voting population's votes if you've ever participated in the Democratic Party in a primary, voted for a candidate. For some reason now, if you swap to become a third-party voter, you're the problem, which makes no fucking sense. But in our first recording of this podcast, I talked about how after the election, even if Kamala Harris got every single vote that went to the lefty candidates, Jill Stein, Claudia de la Cruz, and Cornel West, she still would have not won. Now most of the votes are counted. And I looked into the third-party votes in the swing states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona. The total votes for those 3 third-party candidates in those states was 178,833. Donald Trump won in all of those states by 763,027 votes. So Kamala would still need over 500,000 votes, even if she got all of those candidates' votes, the third-party votes. That's crazy. She would not have won a single swing state if every third-party voter on the left voted for her. That's insane that when the data is as clear as this, and when I tweeted this, I'm not kidding, John, my replies were like, not sure if her numbers are right. This is not something I use my degree in data-driven policy from Brown University for. This is something I learned in Rogers Magnet School. You can search Wisconsin, look at the results, calculate Trump's votes, subtract Kamala's votes. Okay, how many votes did he win by? That's that number. Then you add together the votes that Cornel West, Jill Stein, and Claudia de la Cruz got and see which number's bigger. This is not like crazy journalism or good reporting. This is just like a word problem I could have solved in 5th grade. The American public education system is bad, and I didn't go to a particularly good school. But come on, you guys. At this point, you're denying the facts because you want to blame someone other than yourselves.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you brought those numbers together. Maybe we can tweet them out or something. This is, of course, an audio medium. But you put together a great graphic, Jess, that says it right there. I mean, every single swing state, take all the third-party voters, add them to Kamala's margins, he doesn't win. It's as simple as that, right? Yet so much of this election analysis relies on not accepting that as true. But we have to, so that we can really understand what went wrong here. And you made another point. It's back to this whole debate about moderates and dominating with moderates. But what I never see Democrats doing, right? We, in that Pod Save episode, they talk about how a couple of issues really made the difference in this election, and like crime and immigration, right? What Democrats never do, we just kind of accept that crime and immigration are huge issues without asking, are they really huge issues? And how do we understand the details of these issues? Because just like, take abortion, for example. Abortion, conservatives, before they recognize the division value of an issue like abortion, it wasn't nearly as important as it is today politically. I mean, you had Richard Nixon out there, advancing very pro-abortion positions, right? But then all of a sudden they recognize that, hey, if we start talking about this divides the electorate up into groups that are favorable to conservatives winning elections, right? So that's why we talk a lot for many years. That factor, just its divisive value, has been why we talk about abortion, more, I'd say, than most other factors around that issue that are very important to people. All of a sudden, they recognize that it was a tool to divide people, and I would say the same thing about crime as an issue, about the border as an issue, right? We just kind of accept Republicans framing that, illegal immigrants are here doing crime. Well, native-born populations have much higher rates of crime than people coming across the border illegally, right? And we, take immigration as an issue, right? The Democrats' response to this was not to point out that the reason why Republicans want us to talk about immigration is because they can't talk about what they actually want to do. Because what Republicans actually do is increase the wealth of a handful of people by astronomical amounts. That is the functional outcome of Republicans. But that's not popular to talk about, so they have to talk about something else that's favorable to them, and it's all of these divisive issues. But instead of Democrats naming the game, that's what we don't do. We never name the game. We say Republicans want to talk about made up things on crime, or they want to blow the border crisis out of proportion because it serves them. We never see Democrats out there naming the game of what's happening here. And what's always present is divide and conquer. It's the oldest trick in the book. The Republican Party exists for one reason and one reason only. It's to protect property, and it's to protect, first and foremost, the people who have the most of it, the billionaires. They always pass policies that help them. Those aren't popular, so they need divisive issues. But the Democrats, instead of naming that game and pointing to their own vision, they, for example, adopt the Republican border bill. I mean, you talk about dominating with moderates or not running a left campaign. We literally, our strategy from Schumer and every other leader in the Democratic Party was to let James Lankford, one of the worst Republicans out there, basically write the border bill that we were going to run on. So it's never this, across all of these issues, that's what we always fall into. And then once we lose, the analysis is always, we should have been more Republican on this. It's garbage. It really is, and it drives me insane.
Yeah, I think Kamala on the debate stage is a great example of this, but Republicans will find a single issue that becomes central to the party, because after Reagan, people didn't want to vote for Republicans. They really did associate them with economic issues like exacerbating inequality because they were so aligned with corporations. Of course, the majority of Americans aren't going to vote for that. The majority of Americans are people who work for a living, many of whom work for those corporations. Democrats, instead of pointing out where Republicans are wrong very plainly on issues like abortion that they make central so they still get votes despite increasing economic inequality and running on tax breaks for the rich and increased taxes for the middle and lower classes, now you had Kamala on the debate stage not even saying like, you're just talking about this because you want your rich buddies to get richer. She doesn't even actually respond to the issue as it exists, which, by the way, protecting abortion is very popular across the country. Like, they could have run further to the left on it than they did. But you had Trump say to Kamala on the debate stage, do you support late-term abortion? Do you support abortion after like 7 months or something? And Kamala pretty much gave a non-answer. How easy is it for Kamala to have said, if a woman who is pregnant has a blood clot and it's about to, pass through her heart and potentially kill her, she has a right to be operated on, even if there's a baby in her belly. And that might risk the child's life, but what kind of a society are we in if we don't give life-saving care? That's not very pro-life. And I just came up with that last bit right now. Like, it's not hard to
I was going to donate. I was going to donate to your campaign after that answer. I mean, come on, seriously.
There are so many cases where an abortion is literally just life-saving care for a mother, and the fact that they're afraid to touch it shows how weak the party has become. They're afraid of Republicans. But I want to let you say anything more you want to say about the Pod Save interview, because I didn't watch it, and you did. Is there anything more there we should unpack?
Oh, the Pod Save interview. Well, I think the main thing that stood out to me from the Pod Save interview, you have to remember, I mean, these guys are all Obama campaign alumni. And that was, the first time I got involved in politics was the '08 Obama campaign. And it was, if anybody lived through that or remembers it, it felt really significant. So what was different about that, though, is that they were running an outsider, change, economically populist candidate. It was at a time of economic crisis. There was a big moral vision with heroes and villains. And there was a team of people who prioritized door knocking, who prioritized data, who prioritized, spending campaign resources, very, very smartly, very smart people. And now we have these guys years on after the data machine that they built for Barack Obama kind of took over Democratic politics. So in this PodSave interview, you have 7 experts or however many who can tell you down to the decimal point where things went wrong. We improved Kamala's position 14.3 percentage points among, Latino voters in the exurbs of Philadelphia. They can pinpoint with precision all of these things, right? But what we don't have, we have this data machine that was built for the Obama campaign, but we don't have the Obama candidate anymore. We are just using this data machine with the smartest people in the room, and we're putting that behind candidates who don't have what Obama had, a clear vision that anybody listening to the candidate can understand, oh, he's for these people, he's against these people. This is what this candidate thinks is causing the problems in my life. This is the direction that the candidate's going to go to solve those problems. We don't have candidates at the top of the ticket that can bring the whole big picture together, I don't think, like we did with someone like Barack Obama. And instead, what we have is the false precision and the false security of all of this data analysis that gets us to a place like where we are now, where we lose to an idiot, Donald Trump, for the second time, and we can tell you precisely how it happened, but it's not enough to actually win. So I think if we just keep feeding our faith into this data machine with its false precision, without addressing the larger issue of having an analysis of what's going wrong, who's causing it, and what we all can do about it, I think we're in for a lot of, election postmortems like we're doing right now.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I made the exact recipe for cupcakes, followed it perfectly, except instead of sugar, I used sand. But that's fine, right? I'll still get cupcakes. They'll still be delicious. No, it turns out the key ingredient matters a lot.
Yeah, and you serve them to voters and they're like, what the fuck is this? Is this sand in here?
It's the cupcakes you like so much.
And they're like, no, we followed it precisely. You have to... You
and
can't
then your
fall
teeth
into,
fall out,
yes.
and you have no dental care because you live in America.
And it's people don't like that,
Yeah, but by these definitions, by the Obama structure, which is like the gold standard for all of these West Wing perverts, people who are obsessed with politics and get so much joy from just doing and talking about politics, which is a medical condition that is not yet diagnosable, but I believe one day will be recognized by the people who decide what is a mental health illness. But nevertheless, this is why you have pundits saying she ran a flawless campaign. So let's look at Joy Reid saying exactly that.
Nothing that was true yesterday about how flawlessly this campaign was run is not true now. I mean, this really was an historic, flawlessly run campaign. Queen Latifah never endorses anyone. She came out and endorsed. She had every prominent celebrity voice. She had the Taylor Swiftie to the Swifties. She had the Beehive. You could not have run a better campaign in that short period of time. And I think that's still true.
The key factions of American politics. The Beehive. The Swifties. No, ma'am. let's actually, I want to really focus on, there are some people who are being honest, right? It's a lot of the liberal elites that are associated with like mainstream media that are saying this stuff. But there are some people who are so bold as to immediately after the election say precisely what went wrong. We're going to play a clip from Ryan Grimm.
Path forward. She decided not to do it. One of the things that people were so frustrated about when it came to the 2021 price hikes was the price of Ubers and Lyfts. It takes a chunk out of people. The only thing she could do is go after corporate greed. She starts doing that. Then she is told by Tony West, her brother-in-law, not to do that anymore. Tony West is the top lawyer for Uber. It's absurd. Yeah. And that's the Democratic Party. And they set themselves up to fail. I'm even wondering when Tony West went into the ballot, did he even vote for her? Oh, wow.
So that's a good point. Tony West is Maya Harris' husband. Tony West was also an advisor on the campaign. Some op-eds that looked into him and his role called him her guiding hand. He did everything from debate prep to donor relations. And this is why, coming out of one of her fundraisers, two financial executives spoke to the Times and said Harris told them they expect her to make appointments to the Security and Exchange Commission, the SEC, and the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, that weren't as tough as the agency's current respective heads, Gary Gensler and Lena Khan, who's done a very good job. Now, when you have this happening at the top and you're saying, but we did everything right because you ran an Obama-style campaign, Obama wasn't afraid to entertain the idea that maybe corporate greed is bad in the way that Kamala clearly was.
Yeah, it was a flawless campaign in every aspect except for one, in that it lost to Donald fucking Trump, I think, too, maybe one thing that's been kind of unexplored here is that I think the Democratic Party has a tendency to hang on to whatever the last thing that worked was. So we're trying to just kind of copy the Obama campaign instead of find people who match the current moment that we're in, who set up a compelling contrast with the other party, with Republicans and their agenda, to continuously do things that are new and relevant to the situation that most Americans find themselves in. We can't just keep relying on what worked in the past. We have to build on that. Yet we're stuck in this revolving door of, just like you said, these connections to Uber executives coming in and having influential roles on the campaign. It shouldn't even be entertained that any billionaire donor like Reid Hoffman and LinkedIn could suggest that Kamala Harris should think about firing Lena Khan or something. We shouldn't live in a world where that suggestion is even made because somebody thinks that it might be listened to. We have to not be afraid to update the candidates and the policies and the message that we're putting in front of the American people in a way that's going to resonate. We can't just keep hanging on to things of the past, but so many times I think that's what we fall into because it's easy. It's easy to do.
Yeah, it's honestly like having a pickup line and using it in New York City in the early 2000s and being like, girl, are you the Twin Towers? Because you're the finest building in New York City. And then you try and use it in November of 2001 and you're like, why isn't my pickup line working? And it's like, I don't know, maybe her dad was a firefighter. Anyway, you have to understand that you exist in the context, as Kamala would say. Maybe take your own advice, but it's shown in the data now that what we're talking about is at least a little bit true. When you look at Missouri, where you see Donald Trump won with 59% of the vote, but also a working class policy like raising the minimum wage as a ballot measure won with 57%. And then you look in Nebraska, and you see that, hey, Donald Trump won with 60% of the vote, but a paid sick leave ballot measure passed with 74%. So I thought by the Democratic Party's current strategy that to get Republicans to vote with you, you have to run further to the right. You have to be more friendly to corporations. You have to be harder on immigrants in the southern border who are fleeing unimaginable conditions, humanitarian crises. And so, I don't know. I think maybe it's actually the case that these policies are popular among everyone, and you can run on policies that are popular for the working class and win. But that doesn't mean that Kamala Harris's campaign team and the Democratic Party have a new lesson to learn with this new information, because it's not new. There was polling that came out from Data for Progress, July 26th through 29th. In 2024 is when they did this survey. It came out, I believe, in August, early August. So many months ahead of November 5th. They surveyed likely voters in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Michigan. They asked them if they support a bunch of progressive policies. I'm just going to list out how a few of these went. Do you support each of the following policies? Eliminating medical debt. 64% overall. 52% of Republicans said they support that in swing states, key swing states. Build at least 2 million units of affordable housing. 70% of likely voters in swing states support that. 56% Republican. Instituting a cap on rent increases. 75% overall, 64% Republican. Raising the federal minimum wage, 89% overall, 80% Republican. So this idea that these kinds of politics are alienating or don't work, there's no data or information to support that.
And, Jessica, what do you think would happen if you took these progressive policies that are actually winning, and not just winning, but dominating in red states? I think 74%, on paid sick leave in a red state. If you took all of these policies that are winning currently in red states, you might say that they're dominating with moderates. If you took all of these policies and you attach them to a candidate in a Democratic primary, I can already hear what's going to happen. How are you going to pay for it? You're being too radical. We have to go for the moderate voters. But that would be the response. If a Democrat ran in a Democratic primary with policies that are currently winning in red states, they would say, you are unrealistic. You're going to risk this election for us. You have to draw back on those positions and go for the moderates, and that's how you're going to win. Well, here we are. The candidate that tested that strategy lost everywhere. Swings in New Jersey and New York and California with black women in the South. I mean, we still dominate these categories, but those are the things we should have a lock on, and they're shifting away from us. So if that's happening, everything else is bad. And at the same time, these policies, which you would be derided for running on in Democratic primaries in conservative areas, are winning in the conservative areas. This isn't, to me, really a debate. It's just what we're hearing in this election postmortem is people who have a financial interest to continue running these losing campaigns, defending their legitimacy when there actually is none.
Wow, so glad you brought that up, John. It's almost like we have an example of
Oh, my goodness.
This is a good tie-in. I don't know if you did that on purpose. So, basically, what I have here is every single state's Senate results where there was an election in a state where the Republican was expected to win either narrowly or by a large margin. The one candidate who performed the best with 47% vote share, more than any Democrat got, was actually not a Democrat at all. It was an independent who ran on working class issues on a campaign that challenged corporate power in the country. Dan Osborne did that. He proved that everything they're talking about how you need to run if you want to win is to pander to corporations and some kind of old conservative vision for the country, you don't. And so I brought this up with him when I sat down with him, and he actually hadn't even seen these numbers yet. It was very cute, but I think that's another example.
Yeah, and there you have it, right? I mean, just so I have this right, Jessica, you talked to Dan Osborne, which, by the way, where can people, is that going to be coming out soon? Where can people watch?
You got to subscribe to Dropside News, everybody. It's free to subscribe. You just put in your email and you'll get it.
It's very commie of them. Free news, everybody. Wow. So, here you have it, right? Dan Osborne is a labor leader. Is that right?
Yeah, he led a strike at Kellogg's that got a very good contract.
Okay, and he's an independent, and the Democrats did not run anybody. And you're telling me that he ran ahead of every Democrat in a state where a Republican was projected to win?
And I did not cherry pick these states like, oh, let's look at really hard states. This is from a list put out by the liberal elite Bible, the New York Times. They said,
my gosh,
these are the states where a Republican is expected to win a Senate seat either narrowly or by a big margin. So I'm playing by their rules with these numbers here.
I want to know more, too, because this is an interesting case, isn't it? Here we have an independent candidate who you just told me they haven't really seen these numbers, right?
I can't believe it, but he didn't even look at the numbers. He's ready for the next fight. He's so focused on fighting for working people. He's not, that's another reason he's probably outperforming Democrats, because instead of defending and pointing fingers and saying, you're why I lost, you're why I lost, you're why I lost, he's like, you know what? A lot of lies were told about him. There was millions of dollars in ad buys right before the election. So instead of going on podcasts and being like, I'm actually the greatest and you guys are why I lost, he's like, okay, understand the playing field now, learned a lot. He's focused on the future, on running a PAC where independent working class candidates can run and win around the country. And so that's why Democrats are losing. They care more about defending their careers as a political campaign strategist than actually fucking winning. And it's kind of sad.
Yeah, I would call that sad. But here's the thing that's interesting to me. I mean, we're looking for bright spots where people running on progressive policies that challenge corporate power are putting up impressive numbers in red states. That is Dan Osborne, right? And then, you have him. That's what we're looking for. Then you have the flawless campaign, the smartest people in the room, the precise data-driven campaign apparatus honed since the Obama years that can tell us all of these things, and the people in charge of it, they went to elite schools. They're pretty sure of themselves, yet it was those folks who lost, and it was Dan Osborne who put up these over performances that, before losing this election, the people with the big fancy tools said that, they would be delivering to us, right? So does Dan Osborne, how did Dan Osborne beat the smartest people in the room? Like, can you give us a sense of, is this guy some kind of campaign savant? Did he have 50 people with Ivy League degrees on staff running, precise data in every precinct of Nebraska? Like, what can you give us an outline of that? Like, what accounts for this?
So I actually did one of the first interviews with Dan in March, and he was so nice to give me the last, but I think I learned a lot about how he was running his campaign, and something that's been ignored, and we've pointed out, but it's good to say it plainly, they've ignored the importance of a central message of the campaign. Dan was very clear about what his central message was, and it's along the lines of, there are millionaires in Congress who work for the billionaires. And
beautiful.
Yeah, it's really
instantly makes sense.
Really beautiful. You get what he's about. He knows what the problem is. This is a frustration that nearly every single working class person in America understands. But this is a guy who's literally had to work for a living. So he understands what life is like in America. It's almost like a real representative. He understands people's problems. And he's willing to go to Congress and to fight for them. He's not going to get rich. He's not going because he loved the West Wing and thought his life could be like that one day. He genuinely cares. And I think that his campaign events were very different from this approach of when people are anti-war protesters, you go, I'm speaking, and condescend to them. He actually said the one thing he did is listen. And I saw it. And he said that in the Reflection interview. But when I was there in March, I popped into one of these campaign events. And he was listening. He treated it almost like a town hall. Like, people would speak for minutes at a time, talking about how Deb Fischer's not listening to some issue that really impacts their lives. Railroaders talking about how they're injured on the job, and Deb Fischer, who passed legislation, who was the senator he was running to unseat, to allow railroads to regulate themselves. So big railroad companies now are responsible for testing their own safety and making adjustments. And there were workers there talking about guys getting injured on the job that they used to work alongside. These are tough guys. They don't get emotional. But you could see it in their eyes that this hurts to see this happen to people they work alongside, and that this could be them. And to just have Dan say, that sounds like it makes sense. We should have railroad safety. Of course, I'll support the railroad safety bill. And it's just about really meeting people where they're at and understanding working class issues. Maybe you need to be a working class person to do that.
Yeah, and it strikes me I haven't penciled out all of the math here, but I think it's a fair assumption to make that if Kamala Harris had the kind of overperformance in the swing states as Dan Osborne had in Nebraska, she would have won the race. Do we have disagreement on that? Is that fair to say? Am I off base?
Feel it to be true.
Well, it's the internet and a podcast, so let's just go with that. If I'm wrong, I'm going to drag you down with me, Jessica. But the larger point is, like, where were the bright spots on election night? It was a labor leader, a labor union president who led a strike against a corporation, who had a clear diagnosis. The problem is that Congress is full of millionaires working for billionaires. I am a labor leader. I'm a working class guy. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to make you feel hard. And that right there gave us the overperformance in a very red state, that if that were copied over to other Democratic Senate candidates in less red states, or the Harris campaign in less red states in the 7 battlegrounds, would have put us over the top, right? And it happened without all of this political industrial complex that insists that it knows how to predict the voting behaviors of people, how to test what a moderate position really is, how to triangulate and calculate the perfect little position just to move that one voter over. That stuff lost. And, a pretty simple fundamental campaign is where the overperformance happened. And this also, what I'd wrap up on, this guy was running for Senate. People running for president are usually coming from the Senate, right? There's not a giant gap between a candidate like Osborne in Nebraska and any office in America. Like, what we saw happen there could become the model for Congress, Senate, presidential campaigns everywhere. We saw it here, and there's no reason that can't be the way that we go, or the path forward. And I'm glad to see a lot of people talking about that.
Perhaps, John, there's something deeply psychological happening here. I will explain. So, on Ezra Klein, I'm naming names, by the way. I don't care. Ezra Klein
Please.
Had a conversation on his podcast this week, and it devolved into a conversation about middle-class people not wanting to give up their private insurance, relitigating something people saw as an issue in 2020. So, of course, that's not really how it works. Everyone would have better health care if we had a single-payer system where we could negotiate drug prices as a collective, like every single American is under the same insurance. we could get drug prices lowered. We wouldn't have the sort of lobbying we see to have a shortage of doctors, which is currently a major problem in the country. There would be many issues that would be resolved and their health care would improve. So, having single payer would actually be good. People like Ezra Klein understand that other modern countries have single payer and better care while America pays more for worse care. However, this came up and he defended it. Meanwhile, you have constantly this kind of I'm going to a Trump rally and I'm going to dunk on them interviews where they go, oh, like, what do you think about the Affordable Care Act? And the guy goes, oh, I love it. My wife has a medical condition and now she has health care. And they go, do you like Obamacare? And the person who's working class at a Trump rally is just like, no, Obamacare is bad. Obamacare sucked. And then the person with the mic like looks at the camera in a cheeky way and it gets viral views and everyone's dunking on them. Oh, Trump supporters are so stupid. But then you have Ezra Klein basically saying that the Democrats need to change their whole electoral strategy around these middle-class suburban voters who just don't want to lose their private health insurance. Why is it that we have to change the whole fucking strategy and the policy platform of the Democratic Party? But when it's a working class person, it's we dunk on you because you don't understand how health insurance works. It doesn't make sense. And so it leads me to believe that there is something going on in Ezra Klein and people like Ezra Klein who don't want to accept that working class people are people and are doing essential work to have our country run. I'm sorry. Running a podcast, I say this as someone talking into a podcast about politics too, Ezra, that is not essential work to keep our country running. And I think that maybe would very much upset him if suddenly working class people were people and your value isn't coming from how much money you have, what job you have, and what degree you have. If we actually judge people by the content of their character, maybe Ezra Klein doesn't know who he would be. And maybe a lot of these elite liberal pundits are coming up with excuses that, no, it's not about economic inequality because they have no idea who the fuck they would be if they didn't have class status in the United States. And I think they're scared of that. And that's why their brain won't even go there to entertain that as a reason for why Democrats lost.
Preach. Let's go. I really hope we get an Ezra Klein reaction. That's the only reason I joined this podcast, is to piss off Ezra Klein. But, that I think that's an excellent point, Jessica, too. And I would point back to something you brought up. This is the Schumer comment. But I think polite society, the status quo, private insurance, these things are working least bad. I'm not going to say they're working well, but they're causing the least pain for people in that class that you're talking about. For the fortunate fifth, the educated, suburban, metropolitan people, for whom this stage in our economic system hasn't totally collapsed all around them in a way that produces, pain that is unavoidable. And then you go to the Schumer comment and say, well, we're going to give up on blue-collar voters, and for every one blue-collar voter, working-class voter that we lose, we're going to pick up two, fortunately, fortunate fifth, upwardly mobile, suburban voters all over the place, and including Ezra Klein. And the problem is that there are just not many of those people. Again, I'm going to pull a fact out of the air that might be a little less accurate if you check this, but I think the number of people who have college degrees in America right now is 20%, maybe under that, right? But here the Democrats thought that they were assembling a majority coalition by someone like Schumer coming out and saying, hey, we don't need the blue-collar voters anymore. There's enough people in the suburbs. You're talking about like 20% of the country for whom, all of these factors, healthcare, wages, inflation, transportation, the environment in which you live, isn't really a problem for them. Okay. And if we keep following that strategy, the leadership of the Democratic Party is going to look behind them and see that 80% of the country is no longer there. Which is why I think it's really right after such an election loss like this. What is it? Did we look it up?
You're about right. 24.9%.
Okay, there you go.
It's going up every year, so.
Yeah, I would say for 24.9% of the population, you probably have a good job. You probably have health care that's not the worst from that job. You probably have retirement that compares favorably to everybody else. You probably live in a community that's not by a coal-fired power plant that spits mercury out and gives your children learning disabilities and things. Things are going right for you. And the Democratic Party said, we are going to be the party for you, 25% of the country for whom things are not absolutely going to shit. And if we stay on this course, that's the share of the vote that I think we can expect to get. Life for working class people outside of gated suburban communities. That's not to shit on anybody that's living that life, but we're a big country with a lot of really big problems, and we deserve political representation that is built on what the material circumstances for people punching a clock are like. And in a party that in a system that only gives us two parties, we really have to make sure that the one that's not currently hijacked by Donald Trump is built on a foundation of understanding the material realities of working class people. And I think a campaign like Dan Osborne's comes closer to that than any of the very smart people that just lost to Donald Trump for a second time.
And I will say that someone like Ezra Klein, who is pretty much making excuses for this status quo of millionaires working for billionaires, he is closer to Jeff Bezos and his political views and analysis, because working class people are not taking anything away from middle class people by saying we deserve to be paid more. We deserve to be paid what the value of our labor is worth. I'm sorry, but Jeff Bezos not being able to have another yacht is not on the same moral plane as a mother being able to feed her kids. And Jeff Bezos paying people working in Amazon warehouses, which have much higher injury rates than any other warehouses, him paying them enough so that they can get by, that they can afford a bus to work, which some of them can't, is the right thing to do. And instead, what a lot of liberals are doing, Ezra Klein is among these, is talking about social programs as if that's economic populism. Being dependent on the government for housing, for food, for healthcare is not offering an equal economic playing field. It's not addressing economic inequality in any meaningful way, because now the corporations are giving the money to the government via taxes, or the government's voting to spend the dollars. Instead, working people should just be paid what their labor is worth by the companies and have the independence to decide how they're spending that money. They shouldn't have to do extra paperwork with the government to live a normal life. In Greenwich, Connecticut, which is the neighboring town to where I live in the New York City suburbs, they had this issue. Greenwich is where like a lot of the bankers live, for context. Firefighters and first responders could not afford to live there. And it became an issue because they had to drive very far to get to the rich people to save their lives. Suddenly, it I think clicked for a lot of people in Greenwich, Connecticut, that actually maybe someone who can literally save my life deserves to have a house where they work. It's just crazy that this is what defines our politics, is this mindset of, I want to feel better than someone, and so you guys have to suffer and struggle to get by, when the alternative is not them giving anything up that's meaningful. It's very rich people with billions and billions of dollars having less billions of dollars to level the playing field. It's just making sure people are paid for the work that they do, a fair living wage, and maybe some of what they want as well. I think that's very fair. And the idea that that's treated as something that's crazy is a sickness. And I think a lot of these people have lost their humanity if they can't see political issues that way. And I don't think we have to convince them in order for things to change. I think what we need to change is what the narrative is and what the dominant message is that people are getting. And that's becoming more possible with free media like this. So that's good. But also it sounds like maybe some powerful people are considering changing up how politics is done. Should we get into this Bernie email?
I would love to get into the Bernie email. Let's do this. Oh, there it is. Is it printed? Love that. Podcast listeners, Jessica's held up several printed off. We are a print-friendly medium. Jessica's looking at these printed emails right here, and I think we're going to talk about them.
No, I'm just going to show the print to you, John, and we'll let the viewers guess.
Nice.
Okay, so basically Bernie sent this email. If you're watching on video, we'll put it up on screen, but it's all about how the Democrats ran a campaign protecting the status quo and tinkering around the edges. Trump and the Republicans campaigned on change and smashing the existing order. He finishes the email after starting it off strong, calling us an oligarchic society. He says, how do we best use social media to build our movement and combat the lies and disinformation coming from the billionaire class and right-wing media? How do we build sustainable and long-term issue-based organizing structures? He's really saying we got to change how we do politics in America. And so a lot of people paid attention to this. They said this is not a normal email from Bernie. Now I'm holding up a printed out tweet. Bernie Sanders tweeted out this op-ed about, I'll just read you the title because it gets it pretty good. The U.S. needs more working class political candidates. It's a photo of Dan Osborne. It's all about his campaign. So Bernie makes this email that's about how we need to change how we do everything. And within days, posts this op-ed of an independent working class candidate. So people are saying, is this foreshadowing an exodus of the Democratic Party to have a real worker party?
Wow, what is that feeling for the burn? I think that, there's these kind of suggestions always tip off a frenzy that's similar to me of, Democrats kind of reaching for the third party voter explanation. Anything that threatens the legitimacy of the Democratic Party kind of immediately sets off people saying, oh, you can't do that, then we'll never win. What's different about this time around is that the most promising results we saw came in red states where the progressive policy passed without the Democratic Party affiliation. They came from an independent candidate where the Democrats decided not to run somebody in a state where the brand was already dead. These are where the promising results, the people who could carry progressive policies that most of America wants, they were happening in this way. So I think it makes complete sense if you're trying to figure out how to win and actually get people into Congress that can support progressive policies. The evidence is suggesting what Bernie is outlining in this email. This isn't some vindictive thing about the Democratic Party. It's how do we win in the current political climate? And I think we have to treat it seriously because, again, we might be in the middle of a political revolution right now. Donald Trump captured one of America's major party institutions. I think looking at these election results, what the Democrats might be thinking is, hey, we thought we were the party of normalcy, but it turns out that a lot of the country is shifting away from whatever we are putting forward currently. Nothing is beyond redemption here. But things like this to me are more about, common sense and practically winning and paying attention to where the good results are coming from. And those are from independent labor leader candidates with a clear message that challenges corporate power and calls out the fact that millionaires are working for billionaires in Congress. If you're talking about being clear-eyed, talking about being serious about winning, you're looking for evidence of that happening. Well, it's the progressive ballot initiatives without party affiliation and the independent candidates. And what about scaling up that success doesn't make sense? That's kind of how I look at this Bernie email.
Yeah. And I'm in a small town in Iowa. My folks are now in a small town in North Carolina. And my parents, we grew up a working class family just outside of New York City. I've lived in a lot of parts of the country where we are the people who are kind of ignored by the media. And it's weird thinking that the working class makes up the majority of the country and people without college degrees make up the majority of the country. When you have the media sort of almost saying these folks are not as valuable as us. And this is why there's such a disdain for the liberal elite. Because we know in our hearts of hearts that some of our favorite, most smart, most kind, most funny people do not fit their standards of value. And so while people speculate, oh, is Bernie starting a new party? What's this all about? I think what is happening now is we're no longer letting people tell us what's valuable, who's valuable. And that's good. And I think even if this next presidency is horrible, I'm not saying the costs outweigh the good or any kind of utilitarian philosophical analysis of morality and good and bad. I'm just saying it is a good thing that this country has that realization that we no longer have to be told that our class is our value.
Yeah, that's a great point. And don't forget, all of this election analysis is going to kind of revert to the mean and the familiar. But, just remember the definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice, expecting a different result. We have to respond to the results that we're getting and not be afraid to go into a different direction, to listen to where the winds are coming from, and to rapidly scale that up so that we can actually have a chance at addressing our problems. Something in there, you can count on me in this podcast to come back to this point. Do you mind if I say a little something about an article I read, Jessica?
No, because I just did my thing that I always come back to, which is that working class people are the best and all that stuff I just said.
Best.
So you should do it. Now it's your turn to do the thing.
All right, well, my turn. Here's my turn. Billionaires are the worst. Don't forget it. And, I want to, we always talk about billionaires and just the incredible amount of wealth that they have. It's important to also recognize that the problem there is their power, the concentrated power that billionaires have. So many people out in the country, they don't want to talk bad about success or wealth. They have aspirations of their own for that. And that's all fine, right? The problem is when you have so much wealth that you can start wars, call senators, kill bills, self-finance the presidency. And I read an article that I want to pass on to the audience that I think is really good by my buddy Hamilton Nolan. Hamilton is a great labor writer. He has a podcast a Substack called How Things Work. And he put out one of my favorite things to do, which is just putting into context how much wealth our billionaires have. And he's talking about Elon Musk here, whose net worth exploded after the Donald Trump win. And Hamilton goes on. I'm just going to read a couple things from his article here that puts it into context. The U.S. federal government took in $420 billion in total corporate income taxes in 2023. Elon Musk, just one guy, could pay 3/4 of America's entire corporate tax bill out of his own pocket. He goes on to say, China has the largest annual defense budget on Earth at $296 billion. One guy, Elon Musk, could pay the entire Chinese defense budget and still have $50 billion left over. You get the idea here. But he goes on, J.P. Morgan Chase, the titan of banking in America, it's worth $332 billion. Elon Musk could just buy one of the biggest banks in America out of his pocket. This is one guy who is very close to power in America, who is getting, being floated to have real power over the government, who can just simply buy a bank, buy the entire Chinese defense budget, right? We have hundreds of billionaires. The problem this goes beyond just the absurd amount of money they have. It's a power thing. Running candidates who submit billionaires as the root cause of a lot of the problems for how your life is as a working class problem, or as a working class person. It comes back to the power that is concentrated in the hands of these folks, right? And the last figure that I'll end with, I believe that here's another thing to Google. I'm putting our producer Gabi, shout out to you, by the way, through the ringer. But if I'm not mistaken, the entire bill for how much every election in this last cycle in America cost, the money spent by Democrats and Republicans, came out to something like $5.5 billion. Elon Musk could buy every single election in America on both sides of the aisle with the same amount of effort it would take for you, any one of our listeners, to buy a car. That's a level of power that billionaires have, except the problem is he doesn't have to spend $5.5 billion to buy every election in America. He already got that result with a much lower investment. So when we talk about billionaires as a problem, it's not just that they have a ton of wealth, no matter how they got it. They have too much power. It's getting to an oligarchy level. That's why where candidates have to call it out and run on it. And that's, obvious to most people walking around out there. We should have a democracy, and we don't really, as long as that power is concentrated in a few hands.
Well said, John.
Thanks.
Yes, we want to ask everyone what you want us to cover going forward. Do you want more Elon Musk? Do you want more deep dives and economic explainers? What are you thinking? Let us know.
What's on your mind?
Yeah, what do you want from us? We'll give it to you. And then
Recipes?
Also, we're launching a special thing that is for paid subscribers only, where you can ask us any questions and we will answer them just like this, video and audio, and that will be available on Substack for paid subscribers. Very excited about that. We're thinking of potential future ideas like Trump's tariffs, talking about inflation. Let us know what you're thinking.
Yeah. Get in those comments, get in the menchies, check out the stuff that we're offering on this pod, and let us know how we're doing. Want it to be interactive, and we're all going through this hellscape together. So get at us.
Yeah, we're building a community, and I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful that we can use the internet for good and not for evil. So thanks for listening.
Yes.
John, do you have anything else you want to tell the people before we say goodbye?
Never put a frozen turkey into a deep fryer. Watch the fire department videos about that. It's bad if you do that. Make sure your bird is thawed. Follow us, like us, share the podcast if you like it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of that. And what else here? Happy holidays, everybody, however you celebrate them. I hope you find joy and mirth.
Hell yeah. Make the Yuletide gay.
Yes.
Everybody's gay. The Yuletide is making the
Including
frogs
the
gay.
Yuletide.
It's making
Especially
the
the Yuletide.
carolers gay. They're singing the chaperone.
A favorite.